The engineering bay of the starship Indomitable Will was a universe of noise and light. It was a massive room, larger than a city park, filled with the smells of hot metal and strange chemicals. Sparks fell like orange rain from welding tools. The low, constant hum of the ship's engines was a feeling in the bones more than a sound. This was the heart of the ship, and the ship was the heart of the Targon Empire. Among the workers were humans. They were the newest members of the Empire. They were known for being hard workers and quick to learn, but not for being great inventors. They followed instructions. One of these humans was a man named Jin. He was not a leader. He was quiet and kept to himself. His job was to look after the plasma conduits that ran along the bay's lower levels. It was important work, but it was not glorious. He was often covered in grease and his hands were scarred from small burns and cuts. Jin had a gift, but few people knew about it. He could understand machines in a way that was like a feeling. He could hear a motor running and know if it was happy or tired. He could look at a complex machine and see how all its parts were supposed to work together. It was a quiet magic. His friend, a data analyst named Sumin, knew. She often saw him staring at a flickering light panel or a struggling air vent with a thoughtful look. "You can hear it, can't you?" she would ask him. "You can hear the machine talking." Jin would just give a small smile and nod. Today was different. A special energy filled the bay. Today they were preparing the Aegis of the Void. This was the personal combat armor of Empress Valeriana herself. The Empress was a Valerix, a species that looked like powerful, intelligent panthers. She was tall, fierce, and proud. She had built the Empire with her own will. Her armor was a symbol of her power. It was a masterpiece of black and silver metal, sleek and deadly. It was not just armor. It was a weapon, a shield, and a throne all in one. The head engineer for the human team, a man named Taeho, was in charge of the final check. He was a good engineer, but he believed deeply in rules and orders. He trusted the Empire's technology completely. To him, the diagnostic computer was always right. "Final systems check is beginning," Taeho announced, his voice echoing. Everyone stopped to watch. This was a big moment. Jin paused his work on a conduit and watched from a distance. He saw the armor held in a powerful frame. Lights blinked across its surface. Taeho moved a scanner over the armor, reading the data on his screen. Power core? Optimal. Shield matrix? Stable. Kinetic dampener? Nominal. Taeho called out each reading. All systems are perfect. As expected, but Jin frowned. He heard it. A sound so high and quiet that it was almost not a sound at all. It was a tiny, unhappy whine coming from the armor's back. It was the kinetic dampener. This part of the armor was supposed to absorb the force of blows and explosions. It was one of the most important systems for keeping the Empress alive. The sound was wrong. It was like a guitar string tuned just a little too high. Jin knew he should not speak. He was a low-level engineer. But this was the Empress's life. He walked closer. "Chief Taeho?" Jin said, his voice quiet. Taeho did not look up from his screen. "What is it, Jin?" "I am busy with the most important piece of equipment on this ship. The kinetic dampener," Jin said. "I think there is a problem with its resonance." Taeho finally looked at him, his face showing annoyance. "The diagnostic says it is nominal." "Perfect. The Valerix diagnostics are the best in the galaxy. Are you saying you know better than their computers?" "No, sir," Jin said. "It is not about the reading. It is about the sound. The harmonic frequency is off. If it gets a very specific kind of impact, a fast, sharp hit, the dampener might not work right. It could break." Taeho laughed, but it was not a friendly laugh. "Listen to the sound? Jin, we are not mechanics fixing old cars. We are engineers on an Imperial flagship. We use data.
We use science.
Not our ears. Go back to your conduits." Jin felt his face grow warm. He did not move. "Sir, please, can we just run a level 5 stress test on the dampener? It would show the flaw." "A level 5 test?" Taeho's voice rose. "That could damage the system. On the Empress's own armor? Are you crazy? I will not risk my career because you have a funny feeling." "The answer is no." "The discussion is over." Taeho turned his back on Jin. The other engineers went back to their work, avoiding Jin's eyes. He had been publicly shamed. Sumin came up beside him. "You are sure?" she whispered. Jin nodded, his eyes still on the armor. "It is like a crack in a cup that you cannot see. It will hold water, until one day you put it in hot water and it breaks." "What can you do?" she asked. "Nothing," Jin said, his shoulders slumping. "Taeho is the chief. I have to follow orders. The armor was declared ready. A team of Valerix guards, led by the huge and intimidating Captain Kale, came to collect it. Captain Kale was the head of the Empress's personal security. He was all muscle and sharp teeth, and his eyes scanned the room as if looking for a threat. He took the armor from Tejo with a grunt. As they were leaving, Jin saw something. One of the Valerix guards bumped against the tool cart next to Jin. A small, multi-tipped screwdriver fell from the cart and rolled across the floor, coming to rest near Jin's feet. It was a human tool, simple and reliable. Without really thinking, Jin bent down and picked it up. He looked at the retreating backs of the Valerix guards. He looked at the armor, now being carried away. He knew the armor was broken. He knew it would fail. And he knew the Empress could die. An idea, a crazy and dangerous idea, came into his head. He couldn't fix the main dampener. Tejo would never allow it. But maybe he could do something else. A temporary fix. A patch. The armor would be taken to the Empress's private hangar for one last check by her own technicians. Jin knew the service tunnels that led to that part of the ship. He used them often to fix minor issues. He knew how to get in without being seen. He made a decision. Later, when his shift was over, he did not go to the mess hall to eat. He went to his small bunk, took his personal tool pouch, and slipped into the service tunnels. The tunnels were dark and narrow, smelling of oil and recycled air. He moved quickly and quietly, like a mouse in the walls of a great castle. He reached a ventilation grate that looked into the Empress's preparation room. He peered through the slots. There it was, the Aegis of the Void standing on its platform. The Valerix technicians had finished their work and left. The room was empty, lit by a soft blue light. This was his only chance. He carefully removed the grate and dropped silently onto the floor. His heart was beating so hard he was sure the guards outside the door could hear it. He approached the armor. It seemed even bigger and more powerful up close. He could feel the energy coming from it. He found the secondary access panel on the back near the flawed dampener.
He opened it with a quiet click.
Inside was a maze of wires and tiny energy crystals. It was incredibly complex, but to Jin it made sense. He could see the flow of power. He could see the main dampener line, and he could see the smaller backup emitter matrix next to it. His plan was not to fix the flaw. He did not have the time or the parts. His plan was to create a safety net. He would reroute some of the emergency power from the secondary matrix. He would make it so that if the main dampener failed, the secondary system would kick in faster, much faster, to catch the energy spill. It would not be perfect, but it might be enough to stop a fatal failure. His hands moved quickly, twisting tiny wires, adjusting the flow with his simple tools. He was not reading a manual. He was not looking at a screen. He was listening. He was adjusting the machine until it sounded right, until the tiny unhappy whine was soothed, not by being fixed but by being supported. It took him 10 minutes. It felt like a lifetime. When he was done, he closed the panel. He wiped away a smudge his fingers had left on the beautiful black metal. Then he slipped back into the ventilation shaft, replaced the grate, and crept back through the tunnels. He had done it. He had broken a dozen rules. He had tampered with the Empress's most prized possession. If he was caught, he would be executed. But as he lay in his bunk that night, staring at the ceiling, he tried to find comfort in one thought. If the Empress was attacked, the armor might not fail completely. She might live. He had done all he could. Now he could only wait and hope his terrible mistake would never be discovered. The planet Xylos was a dry, red world. The sky was the color of rust. The air was thin and carried a strange metallic smell. A temporary meeting place had been built in a wide, flat desert. It was a circle of white platforms and shining tents, a small spot of order in the vast empty land. This was where the Empress Valeriana was to meet the leaders of the Xylosian clans. The Xylosians were a tough reptilian species. They were known for their sharp trading and for their sudden, violent tempers. This meeting was to bring them into the Targon Empire peacefully, but everyone knew it was a dangerous game. The Empress stood tall on the main platform. She wore her Aegis of the Void armor. The black and silver metal shone under the red sun. She looked powerful and fearless. Her personal guards, led by Captain Kale, formed a tight circle around her. Their eyes scanned the horizon, their hands never far from their weapons. The Xylosian leaders approached. They were large, with thick green scales and slow, deliberate movements. Their language was a series of low hisses and clicks. Translators worked quickly to turn their words into something the Empress could understand. At first, the meeting went as planned. There were long speeches. There were discussions about trade and borders and rules. The Empress spoke with a strong, clear voice. She offered the protection and wealth of the Empire, but the Xylosian leader, an old and cunning warrior named Grith, was not happy. "We do not need your protection," Grith hissed. "The desert protects us. Your rules are chains. We will not wear them." The air grew tense. Captain Kale took a small step closer to the Empress. He could feel the mood changing. The Xylosians were not here to join. They were here to make a point. Back on the Indomitable Will, the crew watched the events on large screens. The meeting was being broadcast live to the ship. In the engineering bay, most work had stopped. Everyone gathered around the main display. Jin stood at the back of the crowd, his heart pounding. He could not take his eyes off the Empress in her armor. His armor, the armor he had secretly touched. He felt a cold fear in his stomach. He hoped with all his being that nothing would happen. He hoped his fix was not needed. He hoped he had been wrong about the flaw. On the screen, the Empress answered Grith. "The galaxy is changing, Chieftain Grith. You can stand with the future, or you can be left behind in the dust. The Empire offers a partnership." Grith made a sharp spitting sound. "We do not partner with outsiders. This meeting is over." He turned to leave. It was a deep insult, and then it happened. A high-pitched whine cut through the air. It was the sound of a high-energy weapon charging. From a hidden spot on a faraway rock, a sniper fired. A bolt of blue energy designed to punch through the strongest armor shot across the desert. It moved faster than the eye could follow. It was aimed directly at the Empress's chest. The armor's shield system reacted instantly. A shimmering blue barrier flashed into existence just in front of the Empress. The energy bolt hit the shield. For a moment it looked like it would hold, but the bolt was too powerful. The shield flickered wildly and then shattered into 1,000 pieces of fading light. The bolt continued forward and struck the chest plate of the Aegis of the Void. There was a loud, crushing sound of metal hitting metal. The kinetic dampener, the very system Jin had worried about, did its job. It absorbed the incredible force of the blow, but it was the exact kind of fast, sharp impact Jin had feared. The main dampener took the hit. It glowed red-hot for a split second. Then, just as Jin had predicted, the flaw revealed itself. The stress was too much. The dampener could not spread the energy out smoothly. The system cascaded into failure. A wave of uncontrolled force rippled through the armor. It did not stop the energy. It just redirected it. Instead of spreading the punch across the whole suit, it blasted the force directly into the Empress's torso. The effect was terrible. The Empress was thrown backwards as if hit by a giant invisible hammer. She flew through the air for several feet before crashing down onto the hard platform. The sound was sickening. A web of cracks appeared on the beautiful black chest plate of her armor. She did not get up. She lay on the ground, gasping for air. The impact had been partially absorbed, saving her life, but the force that got through was massive. It had broken ribs and bruised her lungs. She fought to breathe, her body stunned. For a moment, there was complete silence on the platform. The betrayal was so sudden, so violent. Then chaos erupted. Captain Kale roared in fury. He and his guards immediately surrounded the fallen Empress, their own shields activating to form a protective dome over her. Plasma blades ignited, filling the air with a deadly hum. They began to fire back at the sniper's position. The Xylosian leaders, seeing their plan fail, drew their own weapons. The peaceful meeting turned into a battlefield in seconds. On the Indomitable Will, the engineering bay was dead silent. Everyone stared at the screen in horror. They had just seen their Empress, the most powerful being in the Empire, fall. Tae-ho, the chief engineer, was pale as a ghost. "The armor, it failed?" he whispered, unable to believe it. "But the diagnostics, they were perfect." Then his eyes widened as he remembered. He turned slowly and looked through the crowd. His eyes found Jin. Jin was still staring at the screen, his face filled with a terrible dread. He had been right. The armor had failed, and the Empress had almost died because of it. The screen showed Captain Kale and the guards fighting their way back to their ship, carrying the injured Empress. The broadcast ended, leaving the engineering bay in a state of shock and fear. No one spoke. The only sound was the constant hum of the ship. They all knew what this meant. There would be an investigation. There would be blame, and the blame would fall on the engineers who had prepared the armor. Hours passed. The ship was on high alert. The mood was dark and anxious. Then the announcement came over the speakers. The Empress's shuttle had returned. She was alive but badly injured, and she was coming to the engineering bay. A new kind of fear filled the room. The large main doors of the bay hissed open. Empress Valeriana walked in. She was not being carried, but she was moving slowly, stiffly. She was not wearing the broken aegis. She wore a simple dark robe, but her presence was still immense. Her fury filled the entire room. Her fur was matted with dust and dried sweat from the desert. One of her arms was held close to her body, and she breathed in short, shallow breaths. But her eyes were the most terrifying thing. They were two pools of cold, burning fire. She scanned the room, looking at each human face. In her hand, she carried the cracked chest plate of the Aegis of the Void. She did not say a word at first. She walked to the central workbench, the same one where the armor had been checked. With a final, furious effort, she slammed the broken piece of metal onto the hard surface. The crash echoed through the silent bay like an explosion. Every engineer flinched. The sound seemed to shake the very walls. Then she turned to face them. Her voice was a low, dangerous growl, but it was loud enough for everyone to hear. It was a voice that promised pain and punishment. Who fixed my armor? The question hung in the air. It was not a request for information. It was an accusation. It was a roar of betrayal. Captain Kale and his guards spread out behind her, blocking the exits. Their weapons were not drawn, but their hands were ready. They looked at the humans with open suspicion. Tejo stumbled forward, his body trembling. Your Majesty, the diagnostics were all perfect. We followed every procedure. I do not understand how this could— Silence! The Empress roared, cutting him off. Her gaze swept over the terrified crowd. The armor failed. I was almost killed. Someone is responsible. I will have the truth now. Her eyes moved from one face to another. One of you touched it. One of you broke it. Who was it? The humans looked at each other, confused and scared. They had not touched the armor. Only Tejo and the Valerix technicians had worked on it. They did not understand the question. Jin stood frozen. His blood felt like ice in his veins. This was it. This was the moment he had feared. She was not asking who broke it. She was asking who fixed it. She knew. Somehow she knew someone had tampered with it. He saw Tejo look at him again, his eyes wide with a new understanding and fear. Tejo knew Jin had tried to warn him. He knew Jin had been right about the flaw. And now he suspected Jin had done something. The Empress took a step closer to the crowd. I will ask one last time, she said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. Who fixed my armor? The silence was absolute. No one breathed. Jin knew he had a choice. He could stay quiet. Maybe no one would ever know. Tejo might not say anything to save himself. He could lie and survive. But then he looked at the Empress. He saw the pain in her body. He saw the crack in the chest plate. He had tried to help and he had failed. He had made it worse. He was responsible. He felt a strange calm wash over him. The fear was still there, but it was quiet now. He had to take responsibility for his actions. Slowly, very slowly, he raised his hand. Every eye in the room turned to him. The crowd of engineers parted, creating a path between him and the Empress. He took a small, shaky step forward. I did, Your Majesty, he said. His voice was soft, but in the silent room it was as clear as a bell. I fixed your armor. The silence in the engineering bay was so deep that Jin could hear the hum of the ship's lights. Every person was staring at him. He felt their eyes like physical weight. He saw shock on the faces of his friends. He saw fear on the face of Su Min. He saw pure horror on the face of Chief Tejo. Empress Valeriana turned her head slowly. Her burning eyes focused on him. She looked him up and down, from his simple work boots to his grease-stained coveralls. She seemed to be measuring him and finding him very, very small. She took a step towards him. Then another. Her movement was stiff from her injury, but it was still powerful and dangerous, like a great cat stalking its prey. Captain Kale moved with her, his hand now resting on the hilt of his plasma blade. You, the Empress said, her voice a low and terrible whisper. She stopped just a few feet from him, looking down at his raised hand. You fixed my armor? Jin lowered his hand. He tried to stand straight, but he could not stop a slight tremble in his legs. Yes, Your Majesty. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd of engineers. They were confused. They thought the Empress was asking who had broken the armor. Now this low-level engineer was saying he had fixed it? It made no sense. The Empress's lips pulled back, showing a hint of her sharp teeth. It was not a smile. You, a human, a junior engineer who works in the dirt of my ship. You dared to lay your hands on the aegis of the void. Her voice began to rise again, filling with fury. You tampered with it? You are the reason it failed? You are the reason I lie in the dust of Xylos? Captain Kale took a step forward, his intention clear. He was going to arrest Jin, probably worse. No, Jin said, the word coming out louder than he intended. He looked directly into the Empress's eyes, his own filled with a desperate honesty. I did not break it. I was trying to save your life. The Empress held up a hand, stopping Captain Kale. Her gaze was locked on Jin. Explain. You have 10 seconds before I decide your punishment. Jin took a deep, shaky breath. The words tumbled out of him. The armor was already broken. The main kinetic dampener had a flaw. A resonance flaw. I heard it. I tried to tell Chief Taeho. He would not listen. The diagnostics would not show it. It was a flaw that would only show itself under a very specific impact. A fast, sharp hit, like a sniper's round. He pointed a trembling finger at the cracked chest plate on the table. I knew it would fail. I knew it could kill you, so after the final check I came here. I used the service tunnels. I went to your preparation room. I opened a panel on the armor's back. I did not fix the main dampener. I could not. I adjusted the secondary emitter matrix. I made a path for the energy to go if the main one broke. It was a patch, a temporary fix. It was not meant to hold forever. It was only meant to give the system a little more time, to stop a total failure. He finished, his chest heaving. The entire story was out now. He had confessed to everything. Breaking into the Empress's private room, tampering with imperial property, disobeying his chief. He was a dead man. The Empress was silent for a long moment. She was just staring at him, her face unreadable. Then she turned her head slowly towards Taeho. Is this true? Taeho looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. He swallowed hard. He did mention a concern about a sound, Your Majesty, but the diagnostics were perfect. I could not risk damaging the aegis on a feeling. The Empress looked back at Jin. A feeling, she repeated, her tone flat. She walked over to the workbench and picked up the broken chest plate. She ran a claw over the crack. You say you made an adjustment? Show me, Jin blinked. Your Majesty? Show me what you did, she commanded. The access panel. The wires. Show me. Jin hesitated, then walked to the bench. Captain Kale watched his every move. Jin pointed to a nearly invisible seam on the back of the broken piece. The panel is here, Your Majesty. It is locked with a magnetic seal. The Empress nodded to one of her technicians. The technician brought over a tool, and with a soft click, the panel opened. Inside was a complex web of crystalline circuitry and microwires. It was a beautiful and terrifying piece of technology. Now, the Empress said, show me your patch. Jin looked inside. He had to find it. His heart was pounding. What if he was wrong? What if the stress of the impact had burned away all evidence of his work? He would look like a liar. He peered closely, his eyes scanning the tiny components. Then he saw it. There, near the main power flow, were two tiny wires. They were a different color from the official Valerix wiring. They were a dull copper, a common human material. They were twisted together in a simple, effective knot, creating a new, faster connection between two systems. It was a classic field repair, something a Valerix engineer would never, ever do. Here, Jin said, his voice filled with relief. He pointed to the two wires. I did not have the right parts. I used these. I connected the secondary matrix directly to the dampener's failure sensor. I made it so the secondary system would activate in half the time. The Valerix technician leaned in, his eyes wide with disbelief. He attached a small scanner to the port. Data flashed on the screen. He looked up at the Empress, his face pale. Your Majesty, it is true there is a foreign modification here, and the system logs show a micro-adjustment was made to the emitter matrix. The timestamp is from the night before the summit. After our final check was complete, the truth was now undeniable. Jin had told the truth about everything. The Empress looked from the wires to the data screen and then back to Jin's face. The fury in her eyes was gone. It was replaced by something else, something deep and thoughtful. She was looking at him not as a criminal, but as a puzzle. "You heard a flaw," she said quietly. "A flaw that our best machines could not see." Jin nodded slowly. "Yes, Your Majesty. Machines look for numbers that are out of place. I listen for the story that is wrong. The dampener song was not right. It was stressed. And you broke a dozen of my laws to try and save my life," she continued. "You knew you would be punished if you were caught." "I knew the Empire needed its Empress," Jin said softly. "My life did not matter as much as that." The Empress was silent again. The whole bay was silent, waiting for her judgment. She looked at the simple, crude copper wires nestled among the perfect Valerix technology. Those wires were not beautiful. They were not advanced. But they had worked. They had taken the full force of the cascade failure. They had given the system that extra fraction of a second. Without them, the dampener would have failed completely and the full force of the sniper's blast would have hit her. She would be dead. Her armor, a symbol of Valerix superiority, had been flawed, and it had been saved by a human with a piece of copper wire. She turned to Captain Kale. "Take Chief Tae-ho into custody. He ignored a direct warning about a threat to my life. He is relieved of his duty." Tae-ho made a small choked sound as two guards took him by the arms and led him away. Then the Empress turned back to Jin. "You," she said. "You come with me." Jin's eyes widened. "Your Majesty?" "You have a skill I do not understand," the Empress said. "A skill that shames my own engineers. You will come to my private forge. You will show me this in listening. You will show me what else you can hear." She did not wait for an answer. She turned and walked towards the door, expecting him to follow. Jin stood frozen for a second, stunned. He was not being executed. He was being summoned. Suman caught his eye from the crowd and gave him a look that was both terrified and excited. Captain Kale gestured for Jin to move. "Now, engineer," he said, his voice a low grumble. Jin took a deep breath, looked once more at the broken armor on the table, and then followed the Empress out of the bay. He was walking away from his old life, into something completely unknown. The Empress's private forge was not what Jin had expected. The main engineering bay was loud, bright, and full of people. This place was quiet, dark, and personal. It was a large circular room deep within the ship. The walls were made of a dark, polished stone. The only light came from soft blue lamps set into the floor, and the gentle glow of tools resting on their racks. In the center of the room, on a raised platform, stood the rest of the Aegis of the Void. Without its chestplate, it looked like a wounded giant. Wires and energy conduits hung from its open front, spilling out like metallic intestines. The air smelled of ozone and cool metal. Empress Valeriana walked to a console and entered a code. A section of the wall slid away, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, on a velvet stand, was the damaged chest plate. She placed it on a workbench next to the armor frame. "Now," she said, turning to Jin. Her voice was calm, but it held a command that could not be ignored. "Show me, not with a story. Show me with your hands." Captain Kale stood by the door, his arms crossed. He watched Jin with a suspicious, unwavering gaze. Jin approached the workbench. His simple tool pouch felt heavy on his belt. The tools in this room were beautiful, made of polished chrome and glowing crystals. His own tools were plain and scratched. "The flaw is still here," Jin said, pointing to the internal mechanism of the chest plate. "My patch burned out when it took the hit. It did its job. But the original problem, the resonance in the main dampener, is still there. It was never fixed." The Empress stood beside him, watching his hands. "How do you know?" "May I?" Jin asked, pointing to the open panel. The Empress gave a single sharp nod. Jin did not reach for one of the advanced Valerix scanners. He took a small metal rod from his pouch. It was a simple resonance tester, a tool humans had used for centuries. He tapped it gently against the main crystal of the kinetic dampener. He held the rod to his ear. He closed his eyes. He listened. The Empress and Captain Kale exchanged a look. This seemed like primitive magic to them. "It sings a G-sharp," Jin said, his eyes still closed. "But it should sing a pure G. The crystal lattice is stressed. It grew wrong when it was made. A tiny, tiny error. When energy flows through it at a certain speed, the G-sharp becomes a scream, and then it breaks." He opened his eyes and put the rod away. Your diagnostics check if it works. They do not check if it is happy. The Empress stared at him. Happy? You talk about the machine as if it is alive, isn't it? Jin asked simply. It has a body. It has energy like blood. It has a job to do. When it cannot do its job well, it suffers. It tells you. You just have to learn its language. He turned back to the armor. I can fix this, but not with your tools. They are too precise. They are made to build things perfectly. I need to fix something that is imperfect. May I use my own? The Empress was fascinated. She waved a hand. Proceed. Jin worked for the next hour. He did not look at a screen. He did not run a program. He used his simple tools. A fine file, a set of tweezers, a small welder. He carefully disassembled part of the dampener, exposing the flawed crystal. He did not replace it. Instead, he used his file to gently shave off a microscopic layer from one side. He was not changing its shape. He was changing its weight. He was changing how it would vibrate. He worked slowly, carefully. He would tap the crystal, listen, and then file a little more. Tap, listen, file. It was like tuning a musical instrument. The Empress watched, never speaking. Captain Cal's suspicion slowly turned to a grudging confusion. This was not engineering as he knew it. This was an art. Finally, Jin put his file down. He reassembled the unit with quick, sure movements. He connected 2 wires to a power source on the workbench. A test, he said. He sent a small, sharp pulse of energy through the dampener. There was no loud crack, no red glow. There was only a clean, soft hum. The crystal glowed with a steady blue light. Jin picked up his resonance tester and tapped the crystal again. He listened and then held it out to the Empress. She hesitated, then took the metal rod. She held it to her own ear. She heard nothing but a faint, pure tone. It is a G, Jin said. The Empress lowered the rod. She looked from the fixed dampener to Jin's calm face. A thought occurred to her. A dangerous, brilliant thought. She pointed to the rest of the armor, standing silent and powerful on its frame. The Aegis is the finest armor my people have ever built. We have improved it for 100 years. It is perfect. Jin looked at the armor. He tilted his head, his eyes scanning it from head to toe. He walked around it slowly. It is very good, he said politely, but it is not perfect. Captain Kale made a low growling sound. You insult the work of the Imperial artificers? I am telling the truth, Jin said, his courage growing. He was in his element now. This was what he understood. It is built for maximum power, but that has a cost. He pointed to the left shoulder joint. This servo is too powerful for the housing. In a year, maybe 2, the stress fractures will start. It will become slow. He moved to the right leg. The power flow to the boot thrusters is restricted here by this conduit. You lose 12% of your potential speed. Finally, he pointed to the back. The main power core is shielded too well. It cannot release heat fast enough. In a long battle, the system will overheat and shut down to protect itself. It would leave you helpless. The Empress was stunned into silence. These were not guesses. He spoke with absolute certainty. These were known, minor issues that her engineers had decided were acceptable trade-offs for power. This human had seen them in minutes. Can you fix them? She asked, her voice quiet. Jin looked at the armor, then at his simple tools. Yes, but not by rebuilding it. That would take months. I can make it better. I can adjust it. I can make the parts work together more smoothly. It will not be more powerful on a screen, but it will be faster. It will last longer. It will not overheat. He looked at the Empress. It will feel better. The Empress Valeriana, ruler of 1,000 stars, looked at the lowly human engineer. She saw the grease on his hands and the intelligence in his eyes. She saw a kind of genius she had never imagined. Her people sought perfection through force and complexity. This human sought harmony through simplicity. Do it, she commanded. Jin nodded. He picked up his tools again and turned to the great armor. He was no longer a criminal in the room. He was an artist being given a masterpiece to restore. He worked for many hours. He adjusted alignment. He polished friction points. He rerouted a few wires to create a more efficient path for energy and heat. He did not add anything new. He did not take anything away. He simply optimized. Captain Kale eventually brought food, which Jin ate without stopping his work. The Empress never left. She sat in a chair watching him. She saw him talk to the machine in a low whisper, calming it, guiding it. Finally, Jin stepped back. He was tired, but his eyes were bright. "It is done." The Empress stood. She walked to the armor. She reached out and placed a hand on the cool metal of the leg. She could feel nothing different. It looked the same. "How do I know?" she asked. "Put it on," Jin said. The Empress called her technicians. They helped her into the refitted aegis of the void. The pieces clicked into place around her. She stood fully armored in the center of the room, and then she felt it. It was lighter, not in weight but in feeling. The servos in the shoulders moved with a silken smoothness she had never felt before. She took a step and the leg actuator responded instantly, without the tiny lag she had always accepted as normal. A diagnostic screen appeared inside her helmet. The power core was running 20 degrees cooler than its usual idle temperature. She moved through a series of combat stances. Every movement was fluid. Every response was immediate. The armor was no longer just a tool she wore. It felt like a second skin. It felt like a part of her. She stopped and stood perfectly still. She looked at Jin through her helmet's visor. He had not made her armor more powerful. He had made it right. And in doing so, he had made it better than it had ever been. She removed her helmet. Her face was unreadable. "Wait here," she said to Jin. Then she turned and, still wearing the armor, walked out of the forge with Captain Kale following behind. The door hissed shut, leaving Jin alone in the quiet, dark room. He did not know if he was a prisoner or a guest. He had done all he could. Now he could only wait for her final judgment. Jin waited in the quiet forge. The only sound was the low hum of the ship. He looked at his hands, still smudged with grease from the armor. He thought about what had just happened. He had touched the Empress's most precious possession. He had changed it. He had told her it was not perfect. He felt a deep tiredness. He did not know if he would be punished or rewarded. He sat on a small stool waiting for his fate. The door hissed open. Captain Kale stood there. His face was as hard to read as ever. "Come," the big Valeric said. Jin stood up. His legs felt weak. He followed Captain Kale out of the forge and through the shining corridors of the ship. They did not go to a prison cell. They went to the main hangar bay. This was the largest room on the ship. It was so vast that smaller fighter ships could land inside it. The ceiling was high above, lost in shadows. The floor was clean and bright. And the bay was full of people. Hundreds of crew members were there. Valeric's warriors in their sharp uniforms stood in perfect rows. Human engineers in their work clothes gathered in nervous groups. Technicians, pilots, and officers from a dozen different species were all present. A low murmur of conversation filled the air. They were all waiting for something. In the center of the bay, on a raised platform, stood Empress Valeriana. She was still wearing the aegis of the void. The black and silver armor gleamed under the bright hangar lights. The cracked chest plate was gone, replaced by a new, perfect one. She looked powerful and complete. She looked like an empress. Jin's heart sank. This was a public announcement. This was where she would tell everyone what he had done. She would make an example of him. He prepared himself for the worst. Captain Kell led him through the crowd. People turned to look. They whispered. They recognized the human who had raised his hand. They made a path for him. Jin felt every eye on him. He kept his eyes forward on the Empress. He was led right up to the base of the platform. He had to look up at her. The murmur in the hangar bay died down. Everyone was silent, waiting for the Empress to speak. Empress Valeriana looked out over the crowd. Her voice was loud and clear, amplified by her helmet. "Today on Xylos I was betrayed," she began. "The aegis of the void, the armor that has protected me for 100 battles, failed." A ripple of unease went through the crowd. Many of the Valerics looked down, ashamed. "It failed," the Empress continued, "because it was flawed. A flaw so small that our greatest machines could not see it. A flaw that our own engineers dismissed. A flaw that would have killed me." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But I am alive." She looked down and her gaze fell directly on Jin. "I am alive because of one person. This human." Jin. Every head in the bay turned to look at Jin. He felt his face grow hot. "He saw the flaw," the Empress said. "He tried to warn his chief. He was ignored. So he broke our laws. He entered my private room. He touched my armor with his human hands. He did not have the right tools. He did not have permission. He used a piece of copper wire to create a patch that caught the energy when the armor failed, a patch that gave me a precious extra second, a patch that saved my life. The crowd was utterly silent listening to this incredible story. "I brought him to my forge," she said. "I watched him work. He did not use our computers.
He did not read our manuals.
He listened. He listened to the machine and he heard its pain. He did not just repair the flaw. He fixed 3 other hidden flaws that have been in the Aegis since the day it was built." She took a step forward on the platform. "He made my armor better than it has ever been. Lighter, faster, cooler. He did not add new power. He simply showed the armor how to be itself. He showed it harmony." She turned her head, scanning the crowd until she found the person she was looking for. Her voice became cold. Chief Engineer Tejo, who was being held by 2 guards at the side of the room, flinched. "You were told of a threat to my life," the Empress said, her words sharp like knives. "You valued procedure over your Empress's safety. You are stripped of your rank. You will be reassigned to waste reclamation duty. You will never touch Imperial technology again." The guards led a pale and shaking Tejo away. No one made a sound. Then the Empress turned back to Jin. Her voice changed. It was still powerful, but it was no longer cold. It was filled with a new respect. "Jin," she said, "step forward." Jin, his heart pounding, walked up the few steps onto the platform. He stood beside the Empress facing the huge crowd. He felt very, very small. The Empress placed a heavy, gauntleted hand on his shoulder. It was a gesture everyone in the room understood. It was a sign of high honor among the Valerics. "This one," the Empress's voice boomed across the hangar, "saw a truth we were all blind to. He acted with courage when the rules demanded silence. He possesses an art we have lost, an art of feeling, an art of listening." She looked at the stunned Valerics engineers. "We believed our technology was perfect. We believed we were elevating humanity by letting them serve us. Today we learn that wisdom can come from the most unexpected of places. We have been looking at the stars for answers, while the answer was here in the heart of our ship, with grease on his hands." She looked down at Jin. "Do not fix my armor in secret again." Artificer Jin, the title hung in the air. Artificer. It was an ancient Valeric's title for a master craftsman. It was a title of great honor. From this moment, the Empress declared to everyone, Jin is appointed Royal Artificer. He will have direct oversight of all my personal war gear. He will have a seat on my tactical council. He will have the full resources of the Imperial Forge at his command. You will give him the respect his skill demands." The silence in the hangar broke. It was not a loud cheer at first, but a wave of murmurs and whispers that grew into a solid sound of acceptance. The humans looked stunned and proud. The Valerics, after a moment of shock, began to nod their heads in respect. They valued skill above all else. And the Empress had just declared this human to be the most skilled engineer among them. The Empress removed her hand from his shoulder and walked away, Captain Kyle following her. The ceremony was over. Jin stood alone on the platform for a moment, looking out at the crowd. He saw Su Min near the front. She was smiling, her hands clasped together in happy shock. She gave him a small, excited wave. He stepped down from the platform. People moved aside for him, but now their looks were different. They were not looking at a criminal. They were looking at the Royal Artificer. He walked through the crowd, his mind buzzing. He was no longer the quiet engineer in the lower decks. His life had changed completely. He did not know what would happen next. He did not know how to be a Royal Artificer. But as he walked back towards the engineering bay, now as its master, he knew one thing for sure. He would never have to hide his gift again.